This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIX.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios. Welcome back to the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel. We've done the offense. Let's move over to the defensive side, right? I think that there's going to be a lot of talk, and it's kind of one of those things that we've talked about here throughout the spring when you're talking about somebody like or let's go Robert Spears-Jennings, right? Third year in the defense, you expect some steps, and I think that you saw that eventually over the last couple of years. Danny Stutzman growing into form, Billy Bowman growing into form, Woody Washington, it seems like, had been here for like 8 years. He's now gone. So Oklahoma's going to lose a lot on the leadership portion of the defense. But on paper, you're looking at a defense that should be really, really good in 2025.
Yeah, I think that's the expectation. They've certainly got the talent to be really good, but they've got a few question marks. I know we'll go through a few of them, but you look on that back end, corner, safety, I think, has a couple question marks. Can defensive end, can a couple guys other than R. Mason Thomas step up? So I think there's a lot of optimism on that side of the ball. They should be pretty good, but I still think they have some questions they have to answer too.
No doubt about it. Bob Brisbillo has gone through each position group, and those are up right now on Soonerscoop.com if you want to read a written portion or a written write-up about each position group and kind of the expectations for that group coming out of the spring. George has taken the offensive side of the football. Those will run here throughout the rest of the week. And you can obviously check all that out on Soonerscoop.com. Really good time to join. Soonerscoop.com, just $1 right now if you want to go sign up. And Diamond Sports are firing up postseason of play, starting for the softball Norman Regional on Friday this week, and then obviously baseball closing out against Texas starting on Thursday. Before we go position by position, let us tell you about our good friends over at Rowback. It is that time of the year. All you got to do is go to rhoback.com and use the promo code, as you see on the screen in front of you, Sooner20 for 20% off. The everyday shorts, the Looper shorts are fantastic if you're getting out onto the golf course. The Delta Performance Pants. Rowback has been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Just go to rowback.com, use the promo code Sooner20. I know a lot of you have, for 20% off your orders. All right, let's get into it here, as we'll start on the defensive line, and we'll start on the interior of the defensive line. Obviously, Jaden Jackson coming off of a freshman All-American season. You get Dominic Williams back. Remember what a recruiting win that was for Brent Venables and Todd Bates going into last portal cycle before last year. And then kind of the unknowns, if you will, but certainly knowns when you're talking about somebody like a David Stone that put Oklahoma fans through the 72 hours of, just not knowing which direction that was going to go after he entered the transfer portal. Obviously, that came to a head, but you feel like, quietly, and we've talked to Josh McCuistion about this as well. Todd Bates came in. He took in a defensive line group that didn't have a whole lot of guys that would just jump off the page at you and say, that guy's going to play in the NFL someday. It certainly seems like that has changed, and it kind of started with David Stone and Jaden Jackson. Obviously, you saw what Jaden Jackson did a year ago, but continued progression from some of those guys, including a Grayson Halton as well. Marcus Strong, even, a guy that has created some buzz for himself this spring.
It's crazy to say this, but Oklahoma has 4 guys that will probably end up playing in the NFL on the defensive line, and it's David Stone, Jaden Jackson, Grayson Halton, and Dominic Williams. And I think for me, Eddie, is you kind of know what you got in Grayson Halton and Dominic Williams. Not to say those guys can't get better and that they won't take another step in their final year at Oklahoma. I think they can. But to me, it's all about how good can Jaden Jackson and David Stone be? Because you see there, Jaden Jackson had just a phenomenal freshman year. First true freshman defensive tackle to start the season opener since Tommy Harris. And he was sensational. I think he played the most snaps of any defensive tackle last year for Oklahoma. Was just a really solid player for OU. I think David Stone is somebody that could have an even bigger year, right? Like, you talk about a guy that didn't play a ton last year as a true freshman, but the potential is through the roof. We saw him out there this spring. You can see him on the screen here now, but he put on, I think, 20 pounds or something this offseason. Just looks phenomenal, moving extremely well. Is a guy that we've heard just lives in the film room, loves studying tape and understanding how to get better as a player. He's a guy, Eddie, that You love what you have in Grayson Halton and Dominic Williams as leaders. Jaden Jackson is going to be a really good player for Oklahoma for however long he's here. David Stone has the potential to be the best defensive tackle Oklahoma's had in a very long time. And that, to me, is how good can he be? We talked about it on the offensive side of the ball. How good can John Mateer be? How good can David Stone be? And can that elevate this defense to another level?
Trent Wilson, another guy that is coming in as a true freshman, and obviously from a physicality standpoint, certainly looks the part alongside somebody like a Marcus Strong. Going to be kind of fun to see how those guys develop under Todd Bates.
What's that rotation like? Because you have your 4, right? And you need, you hope those guys will stay healthy all year. But the reality is at that position, it's going to be tough. Mm-hmm. Who's going to be that 5th guy? Is it a Marcus Strong that it sounds like he's taking a leap now in his 3rd season in Norman? Is it a Trent Wilson who could maybe come and play as a true freshman, follow in the footsteps of a Jaden Jackson and David Stone? Is it a Ricky Lolohea who they add in the portal this spring?
I'm glad you tackled that one because I was not going to even attempt to try.
Not too hard. Lolohea. There you go. You got it. First try. So, but is he somebody? He's obviously got the size to compete at this level. So I think while you have those 4 and you love the potential of those guys, who's that 5th guy? Because at some point in the season, odds are you're going to need a 5th guy up front.
I think they become to be known as salt and pepper, right? You got the pepper side in Todd Bates, the salt side in Miguel Chavis, and we move out to the defensive ends. Obviously, when you're talking about this group, it's hard to start anywhere but with R. Mason Thomas, who I think that not just us that feel like this could be one of the premier pass rushers in the country next season.
Yeah, look, he had, he was top 5 in sacks in the SEC. I can't remember how many he had total. Was it 9 last year? It felt like half of those came in the Tulane game in the last 2 minutes. But yeah, special football player. This is a guy that is going to be an NFL draft pick next year. Could have been an NFL draft pick this year. And it was Oklahoma's priority to keep R. Mason Thomas in Norman. And he got a huge NIL deal to do so. So expectations are through the roof for R. Mason. But
it was a little bit like a Mariano Rivera type closer too. Anytime that Oklahoma needed one of those big plays, and you thought that you even got it in Columbia, right? Before things, really before shit hit the fan, it seemed like he was a guy, if you needed to play off the edge, he was going to make it at the end of last season.
And now you need
and you're right, by the way, George. 9 sacks last year, had the forced fumble as well as 23 total tackles.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, he was just fantastic. Like you said, great in the 4th quarter. Can he bring it all 4 quarters, right? Because and some of that, it just opens up late in games when teams are trying to throw the ball. They're going to pass it, and he just excelled in those spots. But you'd like to see some of that production carry over, into the 1st, 2nd, 3rd quarters and make a bigger impact on the game. Not to say that he didn't make a huge impact last year. He did, obviously. But I think that that's the next step for him. The bigger question, Eddie, is who's the other guy?
Right.
Who's going to be on the other side? You've got Taylor Wine, who had a great spring, right? He didn't play much last year, but looks the part. PJ Adebawore, huge season for him. 3rd year in the program. He's a guy that everybody says should be the next big playmaker. You look at him, he's the best looking player on Oklahoma's roster. Can he be a difference maker next year? And I think that that's kind of the guy that I've circled. Okay, you like what you have in some of these other guys. You bring in Marvin Jones Jr. from Florida State.
I was going to ask you, where he goes through the spring, obviously. Yep. Marvin Jones Jr. did. Coming in from Florida State, certainly hasn't had the type of production at the collegiate level that I think a lot of people saw him having coming out of high school. How does he fit into this mix? Because he does bring with him a ton of experience coming in from Tallahassee.
Yeah, and he's played at a Power 4 level in the ACC and against really good opponents. Started his career at Georgia too, so he knows what the SEC looks like. I think he has a lot of talent. What does it look like in this defense? Can Miguel Chavis get it out of him? Can Brent Venables put him in positions to have a big year? I think he's going to end up being your day 1 starter. Is he the starter by the end of the season? I don't know. Maybe he's like a Trace Ford type role where he's playing certain situations, and Trace had a great year last year, but I like his veteran leadership that he brings into the room. Obviously, his dad, he's got the pedigree of somebody that played a long time in the NFL. I think that he could have a big year. I just wonder, too, could a PJ Adebawore pass him up? I think that PJ could have a huge year if he stays healthy. Taylor Wine is a name that continued to come up this spring. So I like that group a lot. Danny Okoye, that's a guy that I feel like we haven't talked a ton about, but we always say,
perhaps the truly biggest unknown on the roster right now. And
yeah.
I think you go all the way back into his high school recruitment when we would talk to Josh coming in for recruiting reports, or whether it be throughout the season a year ago as a true freshman, Danny Okoye's name always came up in talking about the future of the Oklahoma program, particularly on the defensive side of the football.
Well, he just looks amazing out there. And you think about the twitch that he has, and if you put him on one side and R. Mason on the other, I just feel like they're going to be able to get after the quarterback. So do they unleash him this year? Can he pick it up mentally? Because I think that's the biggest thing for a young guy like him. I think he's got to be able to understand what they're asking him to do, play assignment sound football. And that's something that Ethan Downs was incredibly good at. He didn't have the talent or the athleticism that somebody like a Danny Okoye did, but you knew what you were getting from Ethan on every single down. So for Danny, I think it's about consistency, continuing to develop, and then can Brent Venables, Miguel Chavis find a really good role for him? Maybe it's a third down thing and he can come in and you got a different package and you just kind of let him loose. Because I think that's where he excels, is just let him go chase after the football.
If nothing else, when you're talking about a defensive line, when you combine the interior with the outside guys, we just went through 9-10 names that Miguel Chavis and Todd Bates have brought in, and now it's kind of their turn to develop that talent. And obviously, can you get an R. Mason Thomas to go from maybe a day 2 pick into that first round, and what a coup that would be for somebody like Miguel Chavis?
Oh, it'd be awesome. And you think back, it wasn't long ago, Eddie, that OU had Perion Winfrey, Isaiah Thomas, Nick Benito, and Ronnie Perkins.
Sure.
But they had nobody else, right? And those 4 had to play almost every snap, and that was brutal for those guys. That's not going to be the case. They can give R. Mason Thomas a break. He doesn't have to play every single down, right? Like, Dominic Williams doesn't have to be out there all the time for Oklahoma. So I think that's what really stands out about this group, the depth, the experience. Now you've got a lot of guys that have played really good football for you. And like you said, I think there's multiple draft picks on this defensive line, and how good would that be for recruiting? We talk about Oklahoma kind of being a recruiting spell right now. I think if you can get some of those guys drafted this next year or in the next couple years, maybe that can really take off in recruiting.
From the defensive line, we move into the middle of the defense, right? You talk about the linebacker position. Nate Dreiling comes in. We had talked about him throughout the spring and how much we enjoyed going out and watching his group go through individual drills, particularly just watching Nate Dreiling coach. I think he's a guy that lines up from a mentality standpoint after we heard from him after the Crimson Combine. Certainly lines up with what Brent Venables wants or what you would envision a Brent Venables linebackers coach to be. You bring in Wes Goodwin as well, coming in from Clemson. Some familiarity there. We'll get to the cheetah position more specifically here in a second, but you lose Danny Stutzman, right? And the tremendous gap that is going to have to be filled. The good news is you have some guys that have played some football around here, right? When you're talking about a Kobe McKenzie or a Kip Lewis or even a Sammy Omosigo, it's going to be kind of fun to see what Nate Dreiling puts together with this linebacker core.
And I've been really impressed by Dreiling so far. It seems like the players love him. Very energetic coach. Loves to use the F word, which we appreciate on this show. But I think he's done a good job with that group, and he takes over a group, like you said, Eddie, extremely talented, extremely experienced. When you talk about the amount of games, big moments that a guy like Kip Lewis has had, you think back the 2 pick sixes last year against Auburn and Alabama, massive plays for OU last season. He's a guy that I expect to take another big leap. This is a player, Kip Lewis, if he has another really good year, he could end up being a day 2, obviously a day 3 type of draft pick. He has that type of athleticism and ability. So I think he could have a huge year. You see Kobe McKenzie as well. He's been that guy that's kind of had to wait his turn.
Sure.
And in today's world of college football, he had opportunities to leave, right? He could have gone somewhere else and started and been that Mike linebacker for another program. But he's waited his turn. He's played good football for Oklahoma. Can he live up to what Danny Stutzman left behind? I don't know. I think that's a really, some really big shoes to fill, but I do think he has great leadership skills, tremendous athlete, and somebody that I think could have a big year for Oklahoma. Sammy Omosigo, though, that's the name to watch for me. Where does he end up? How much does he play? He moves inside, played a lot of cheetah the last couple of years. Sounds like he's really excelled at Mike. I think that he's really pushing Kobe at that starting spot. So I think you're going to see both those guys play quite a bit for Oklahoma alongside Kip Lewis.
It's going to be weird not looking out there and seeing number 28 because Danny Stutzman had been there for so long. I still think that people, even when the season begins, they're not going to maybe even realize what they're missing until the games begin. I think they're going to be fine from a reduction standpoint, but he was just one of those guys that did a little bit of everything, and I think it's going to kind of come to the forefront. He's just a guy that you never had to worry about, Danny, especially over the last year and the maturation that he went through.
I think he was rated as the number 1 run stopper at linebacker in the country last year by Pro Football Focus. I mean, this guy was a monster in the run game, and I think that you're going to see that play out on the field. They're going to have to try and fill that gap, and I think they can. I think they've got really good players there. It just might take them some time. It might take Kobe McKenzie, some games to really get into the flow. Samuel Mosigo playing a new position, it might take him some time. And that's the one thing at linebacker, Eddie, that I'm curious about, and we'll get into Cheetah. They don't have a ton of depth there, right? That was a position that we thought maybe they would try to add in the portal because while you love Kip Lewis, you love Kobe McKenzie, Samuel Mosigo, after that, it's like, okay, is Taylor Heim going to play Cheetah? Is he going to play Will? Kendall Daniels, he's played linebacker. Is he going to play Cheetah? I think they're going to have to do some mixing and matching if one of those guys were to get hurt next season.
That's kind of a perfect segue to get into the Cheetah position because it is such a, I don't know, there's so many variables that go into it when you're talking about body style and what they want to use. You mentioned Taylor Heim. He's a guy that has certainly emerged over the spring for Oklahoma, coming in from Bethany High School, going through his redshirt season a year ago in Norman in his first season. And then obviously the veteran of the group in a way, when you're talking about Kendall Daniels, and then you start working the way through some of the safety guys as well that have been working Cheetah, whether it be a Reggie Powers or a Jaden Hardy. It's a very interesting group, but it's hard to start talking about the Cheetah position and not begin with Kendall Daniels coming in from Oklahoma State.
He fits the mold of what Oklahoma wants to do at that position. And when Brent Venables was hired as the head coach at Oklahoma, there was a lot of talk of what's that going to look like here. And you saw the players that Clemson produced at the Cheetah position, Isaiah Simmons, the most notable guy now playing in the NFL. That's what Oklahoma wants. They want the 6'5", 240-pound guy who can run, who can cover a tight end, or even maybe not the fastest slot guy, but can at least put in there and be physical. And Oklahoma hasn't had that. They had Deshaun White year one, who was playing out of position. I think he did a nice job at the Cheetah spot. I think Justin Broyles played there some too, and it just wasn't very good. They had, who was it? Justin Harrington in year two. He gets hurt. You had to play Dasan McCullough there, who was playing a little bit out of position. Last year, you had Kendall Dolby until he got hurt, and you had to play Dasan McCullough again. They haven't had the perfect guy to play that spot. I think they feel like they found it in Kendall Daniels. The question now is, what do you do with Kendall Dolby, who was really good for you before he hurt his ankle?
Right.
What's his health status? What does that look like? You love Reggie Powers, too, out there at that position. I know that the staff loves his ability to cover in space and is also physical, but again, not the biggest guy. And Taylor Heim, he fits the same body size as a Kendall Daniels. He just doesn't have the experience. Made a lot of plays in the spring. What does his progression and development look like? But to me, you're right, Eddie. It's all about Kendall Daniels. How does he fit in this defense, and can he excel at that position? Because we saw it at Oklahoma State. He was really good as a safety, right, and early in his career. Last year, he wasn't very good playing inside linebacker. Maybe he can find a home in that hybrid position where you're playing linebacker, safety, corner, all of those different things.
Certainly seems like when you're talking about, maybe just of the newcomers, and you could maybe even throw him in with some of the guys that are returning from last year's defense that played quite a bit. Doesn't it seem like if there was anybody that had a star bigger than, the biggest star, I guess, it was Kendall Daniels, and especially the way that they talked about him, they being Nate Dreiling or Wes Goodwin or even Brent Venables coming out of the spring after the Crimson Combine of, you loosely had some of those Isaiah Simmons comparisons being made.
Yeah, and some of that was the media us saying, hey, is he like Isaiah Simmons?
Sure.
Kind of bringing it up ourselves. But, Wes
branded him, tried to brand one of them.
Yeah. And Wes Goodwin, basically said it too. And he's obviously seen a lot of great players come through Clemson. So, if he can be like Isaiah Simmons, Oklahoma's got a star. We got to see it on the field, see how it plays out. But I also
Pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah, I also thought Kendall, though, when we talked to him in the spring, him talking about why he chose Oklahoma, wanting to play for Brent Venables, wanting to kind of play that cheetah position and find that role, which I think is what he'd play in the NFL. I do. I think he would play kind of that almost nickel position, outside linebacker type of player, and I think that he feels like he can really excel there. So We're just gonna have to see how it plays out. But he's gonna play. We'll see where he plays, Eddie. I think either way, he's gonna play a major role in this defense.
Well, and if that's to be the case, then you mentioned him, Kendall Dolby. What do you do with Kendall Dolby? And I think that when you start getting out on the corners, then you start talking about the quarterback position, Gentry Williams, Jacoby Johnson, Eli Bowen. Those are kind of your knowns, right? If you needed help at the quarterback position with Jay Valai, maybe you would move a Kendall Dolby outside.
Yeah, and look, I think you're going to have situations where maybe they want to have 6 DBs out on the field, and you've got Kendall helping, guard the slot. You've got Kendall Daniels out there. You got Eli Bowen, Jacoby Johnson, and 2 safeties, Robert Spears-Jennings and Peyton Bowen. You could see that where they try to get all those guys. I think you're going to see, situations where you've got Kendall Dolby and Kendall Daniels on the field at the same time. But it's interesting because I think the corner position, Eddie, is a spot where they like their young talent, but they're unproven, right? You mentioned some of the guys. You love what Eli Bowen did as a true freshman. Can he take another step? Jacoby Johnson, we saw flashes of him being a really good player. He could be starting next year at corner for Oklahoma. I think he's that good. Gentry Williams, what's his health status, right?
That's going to be the biggest question mark because as you see him there on the screen, certainly looks the part. And I think that
he's an NFL corner.
He's one of those guys that everybody cheers for, being a kid from Tulsa. I was there for his commitment ceremony way back when. It seems like Gentry's another one of those guys that has been around the block a time or two here in Norman. And then, obviously, Jacoby Johnson, as you see on the screen here, another guy in Eli Bowen that really quietly, if you weren't talking about Jaden Jackson as a freshman All-American, Eli Bowen was kind of in the same breath, was he not?
Oh, he was huge. And you think back that pick he had against Alabama there that you're seeing, was just a monster play. And for a true freshman to play like he did last season, to really be thrown into the fire. I think it was the Texas game that he was thrown into that game, and it played extremely well. I think that he could be somebody that could take another step. And then it's all about the younger guys that we haven't seen yet. Cortland Guillory, a name that came up a lot this spring, a true freshman. Can he get on the field? Malik Hawkins, obviously he's got a great mentality. We saw him out at summer camp last year and was just fantastic. I think he could maybe find his way onto the field. Jeremiah Newcomb in his second year. Davon Jordan, a guy that we never talk about.
Both guys that we simply just did not talk about a whole lot. And then you look up and, albeit it was the Crimson Combine, you can't take a whole lot out of it. But I do think that Davon Jordan is somebody, the fastest guy on the team, especially when we talk to the players. He's a guy that I think you need to circle and remember going into 2025.
He could be that surprise player on the defense where we're talking about all these other guys, and all of a sudden you look up and Davon Jordan's playing. And there was moments last year where they threw him in the game a couple times. So can he take another step? And that's the thing, is they don't have a ton of experience at that position. But I do think that, Jim Nagy said it at the Crimson Combine that they feel really good about the young talent they have at corner. We just got to see it play out.
Which kind of, I think, meets in the middle in terms of explaining the reasoning for Oklahoma not being just terribly involved with the quarterback position here during the spring portal.
Yeah, and it's an expensive position because when a good corner enters the portal, a lot of people want to go after him. You see it in the NFL, right? Free agency corner is usually a premium spot that gets paid very well because it's a really difficult position to play. So there wasn't really anybody that got in the portal that Oklahoma was super interested in, and if they were interested, they weren't really interested in paying a ton of money for him. So I think Oklahoma's saying, you know what, we're going to bet on our young guys, and we're going to bet on Gentry Williams possibly being healthy.
Certainly some unknowns at the cornerback position, just in terms of, if you don't keep up with it every day, you might not be familiar with a Davon Jordan or a Jeremiah Newcomb. I feel like it's kind of the opposite when you look at the safety position in Brandon Hall's unit, because obviously some of the best looking guys in terms of the secondary, physicality wise, but there are some knowns when you're talking about a Robert Spears-Jennings, when you're talking about a Peyton Bowen who sat out most of the spring, nursing a little bit of an injury. And then you start working your way through the guys that, the trio of guys that are kind of the knowns in that freshman group, whether it be a Michael Boganowski, Jaden Hardy, or Reggie Powers.
This is the group to me, Eddie. I feel like everybody's been talking about corner, and rightfully so. I think that corner had kind of a shaky year last year. You've got a lot of new guys or young guys that are going to have to step up. Safety is a spot that I don't think we've talked enough about, that it's going to be extremely difficult to replace what Billy Bowman did for this program the last few years. I thought he was just a sensational player. We talked about Danny earlier. I think Billy's going to be even tougher to replace, and I think that you love what you saw from Robert Spears-Jennings at times last year, and then other times he would disappear in terms of making big plays, or sometimes was taken out of games, in moments. So I think that you love what you've seen from him. He's had tremendous growth and development. He's got to take another step. He's got to be a big-time playmaker for Oklahoma. And then next to him, you love what you saw from Peyton Bowen as a true freshman. Dealt with some injuries, but was really productive as a true freshman. Really thought he probably should have played more in 2023. And then last year, dealing with some more injury stuff, just wasn't able to stay on the field, didn't make a lot of plays for OU, didn't see the field a ton at times throughout the season. He's got to take a big leap. He's got to live up to that 5-star billing that we heard all about a couple years ago. That's the big question for me, is who's next to Robert Spears-Jennings? Is it Peyton Bowen, which I think we all are assuming it will be, even though he didn't go through the spring. But he's got to be better. He's got to be a big-time playmaker. He's got to be that 5-star player that we know he can be. And if he's not, is it Jaden Hardy? Is it Michael Boganowski? Is it Reggie Powers moving from cheetah back to safety? Because you love those guys. They've got a lot of talent at that position, but we haven't seen enough. We saw Michael Boganowski last year, and he makes that big, tackle in a couple games. Then he makes big mistakes, right? Sure. You think back to I think it was the 90-yard touchdown that Navy had. Michael Boganowski blows his assignment there on that play, if I remember correctly. So it's little things like that experience isn't there, but the playmaking ability you hope can appear for some of those young guys.
We're just a couple days removed from, I guess officially Billy Bowman signing his contract with the Atlanta Falcons. You would expect some of these guys to play in the National Football League before it's all said and done. How good can a Robert Spears-Jennings be going into this season? This feels like a big year for him to maybe take that next step as a known name, not just in Oklahoma households, but obviously throughout the SEC.
He's certainly somebody that should be drafted next year, and it's a case of whether is it on the back end of a draft or can he move himself up into even a day two, because unlike Billy, the one thing that people knocked Billy on was size.
Right.
That's not something you can knock Robert Spears-Jennings on. He's got the size to play the position at the next level. It's just, can he be consistent with this play, make some bigger plays in games? Billy was really good as a ball hawk, right? Mm-hmm. And then when he got the ball in his hands, he'd go score too. But can Robert make some of those plays? Can he be better in coverage? I think he's a really good player that can run up and stop the run, but can he be somebody that can cover better? I think those are the big questions for Robert. But leadership-wise, growth, development, I think he's somebody that you circled that could really take because you saw it last year. He took a big step last year from his sophomore to junior year. Now in his final year, can he take an even bigger step and be a dude for this defense?
As much as we talked about the retention of somebody like R. Mason Thomas, for example, coming out of the spring or out of the season into the spring, Robert Spears-Jennings was another one of those guys that a lot of other teams were coming after to try to, incentivize to make the jump into the portal.
Teams were tampering with him, Jaden Jackson, David Stone, obviously. Like there was quite a few guys, but Robert was certainly somebody that I think Oklahoma had to pay up a little bit to keep him, and he was a priority. You look at all three levels. I think it was a priority to keep R. Mason Thomas, Kip Lewis, Robert Spears-Jennings. Those guys are the new backbones of this defense heading into 2025, and rightfully so, because we saw last year, all three of those guys had really good years. Now they have to be great.
As we talked about on the offensive side, or the offensive portion show that we did, you can see that here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Much like the offense, Oklahoma does, I guess, technically have a new defensive coordinator this year with Zach Alley headed to Morgantown. Brent Venables takes over. I don't think that you're going to see a just massive wholesale change, but what are the expectations going into year number 4 for Brent now running a defense?
It's got to be elite. I think, it can't just be good. It's got to be elite. And, we've seen that under Brent Venables as a defensive coordinator. We've kind of seen it as a head coach. And yes, Zach Alley called the defense last year, but obviously Brent Venables had his hand in what they're doing. And, I think ultimately you think back to the Jim Knowles saga and how that all played out. I think Oklahoma is certainly fine with how that all played out. And Brent Venables, in a year that's make or break for him in terms of his job security, I think that he likes the pressure put on him. I mean, when I asked him before spring practice about, hey, what went into that decision? And he was like, well, I'm the best guy to call this defense. And I think that that's right. And so I think that this defense can be really good. What can he get out of them? What does it look like? Last year, they were, I think, like top 20 in nearly every category. Can they take another step? Can they be a top 15, top 10 type of defense? And if they can, paired with an offense that should take a big leap, I think you're looking at a season where Oklahoma can win a lot of football games.
It's still kind of crazy to me that we just kind of shrug our shoulders, and maybe even some people roll their eyes when you talk about Oklahoma defense and what that thing has kind of undertaken here since Brent from day one.
And the talent level is just totally different.
Night and day different from what he inherited, obviously. And now it's going to be a lot on the offense to meet what this defense is, at least on paper, going into the 2025 season. That's going to do it for a look at the Oklahoma defense on the backside of the spring as we enter into the summer. For George Stoia, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.